Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. I can't believe we're already at the afternoon. So thank you for coming along to this session. And, some of you will know Michelle Parry-Slater already quite well. She has been an award-winning learning and development professional for the last 20 years. And she's also the founder and director of Caro's Modern Learning, which is an L&D consultancy focused on really moving from traditional learning to the best of digital and face-to-face, digital, social, and face-to-face workplace learning. She works with clients such as CIPD and also the Co-op and Duke of Edinburgh Awards. She was also a lead volunteer for L&D for Girl Guiding from 2017 for a few years. And she was also listed in the top 20 corporate e-learning movers and shakers in 2018 by the e-learning industry. So obviously today we're here together to hear a little bit more about Michelle's book, the Learning and Development Handbook, which was published by Kogan Page. So the way we're going to run this is I'm going to just put a few questions to Michelle. We're going to have a conversation. And then after about 20, 25 minutes in, we're going to open the floor if you want to ask any questions. However, as we have this conversation, if there is a burning question that you have in your mind, please throw it at us. We're very happy to take that because we don't want you to forget. If you have, I'm sure you have lots of great questions, so throw it out and we'll go with the flow. We're very happy to go with the flow. And just to say, I'm Celine Mullins. I am a psychologist and coach working with organizations with Adaptus training, which I founded 15 years ago. So let's go for it. So, Michelle.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a real honor for me to meet Michelle today for the first time face-to-face because we've only ever spoken on Zoom. And I loved when I initially heard about the book. I started listening to some podcasts that you've been interviewed on, and I just loved the practicality of this book. So can you tell us what was most important to you, Michelle, about writing this L&D handbook?
So for those that haven't seen it, this is the book. This is the first time it's been out in public with me in real life. So I'm really honoured that you've all chosen to spend your lunchtime with us. Thank you. It was very clear from the very concept of writing this book. There's a lot of L&D books out there, aren't there? But for me, I always felt as a practitioner, there wasn't a book for me as a practitioner. There wasn't a book that was focused on learners, but taught me as a practitioner how to do that. So that was my absolute number one priority, is who is going to read it? And I wrote for myself as an L&D practitioner of many years. And so that focus hopefully has come across in the practicalities and the how, and I'm glad that having never met and never read it, that you picked that up straight away. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, of course, it's the learners, because they're the people who are going to be the recipients of the work that we do. And I use that word with caution. Anyone who's read the book will know in the very early chapter it says, learners, we're talking about people. But if I say people in this context, we might not know who we're talking about. So forgive me for labeling, because I don't like labels at all. But definitely focus on the end recipients.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. And then as you went through the process of writing it and now having it published and beyond, and having these conversations with us and on podcasts, etc., what has been really cemented for you in your own learning as you've moved through this? So what's cemented for you in your own learning?
Definitely asking for help. So I've been a L&D practitioner for a long time, and can talk about that till the cows come home. But I'd never ever written a book. I'd spoken on this stage at Learning Technologies, at CIPD's conferences, all different conferences for a long time, but I'd never written it down. And actually, the ability to find my written voice from having had a spoken voice, they're very different voices. So I needed to realize in my own self, to stop beating myself up, God, why is this so hard? Kogan Page had trusted me. And I sat and stared at a blank page for about 3 months. And then the blank page almost got like a mountain that was bigger and bigger, and I need some help. And when I realized in asking for help that I'm not a writer, of course I'm not a writer. I would never expect my learners to go and do a job that I've not actually helped them learn to do. So I need to learn how to do this. So I got in touch with a copywriter, and I said, can you help me to translate my spoken voice into a written voice? So she did that, and just as a kickstart, and as soon as I saw it translated down onto the page, and how we did that was I voice recorded into my phone. I emailed off them to her, those voice recordings, and she sent me back. It wasn't obviously word for word, it was written words rather than spoken words. And I recognized myself. I was like, oh, it's like almost like looking at a sort of a photograph of you that you hadn't seen before. And I was like, oh yeah, that's me, that's how I did it. So definitely my learning in writing a book was ask for help.
I think it's a really good point, because I think as learning professionals, we often feel like we need to understand a whole load of different things. I know when I was writing books as well, I had to really find my authentic reading voice. And so asking for that support is so important in a whole load of different ways. And I think actually that's something that a lot of us have had to really learn through COVID as well, is asking for that support. And not all of us are great at it. And is there any other learning for you that has been cemented in even how you approach when you're working with clients and working with the learners, with people now? Anything else that's been cemented in your approach?
A lot of what's already been talked about at the conference, actually, which is that we really need to get to the root of the problem. As L&D professionals, we have for many a year been great at rushing in with solutions, and you'll find in the book that we don't even start to talk about solutions until quite a few chapters in, because we need to do better, I think, at gathering, why are we here? What are we here to do? What's the problem that we're trying to fix? What's the learner's perspective on that? What's the stakeholder's perspective on that? And we need to start sooner with those conversations, so that when we get to solutions, we have a hope of them actually landing with the people. So we're moving with people rather than to people. And I definitely think that we need to start earlier at that.
It's just genuinely curious like children asking questions.
Absolutely agree with you there. Definitely the curiosity, of me learning how to write, the curiosity of your learners how to change their behavior or change their skills in order to do their job better. How do we ignite that curiosity in those people? And you certainly don't do it by going, here's a program, here's a course I wrote for you, come on my course. How is that related to my day job? And of course, they might come on your course and go back and do exactly what they've always done without any curiosity at all. There's a case study in the book with a piece of work I did with Virtual College, and it was called the Curiosity Project. It was a really great piece of work. Really recommend reading it.
Recommend reading that. So you have to get the book to read it.
They're available outside.
Go to Kogan Page. So Michelle, would you mind talking us through, because as you said, you tried to really focus on keeping the book practical. Could you talk us through the structure of the book?
Yeah, no worries. So I wrote the book on purpose in a way which...
Hang on a second, sorry, I just have to check a message here, sorry. Okay. Sorry, everybody, sorry. Back with you in a second.
Just talk amongst yourselves from
there.
there.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, I just need to... Hello? Yeah, no,
I mean, this is the reality, isn't it? This is the reality of what we're dealing with. That, thank you to our Oscar-winning actress over here. We are dealing with people who've got better things to do than read your book. They've got better things to do than come on your course. They've got better things to do actually just navigating their way through the crazy world that we currently find ourselves in. And so learning, whilst they may be very passionate about it, actually is often further down the to-do list. How can you be more interesting than that phone call? Or how can you be more interesting than the brochure that's in front of them? And so I wanted to write a book that really recognized you're all too busy to read it. I've got a whole, I don't know if you like this, got a whole shelf full of books by fantastic authors that I'm, honoured to have worked alongside and know very well. Shh, they're not in the room. I haven't read all of them. I don't expect you to read all of my book. So what I did was recognise that truth and break it up into very small parts, particularly the short read and the long read. So often we've got time for a blog, sort of 600,000-800,000 word things. So the short reads are the gist of the chapter. It's what I think about that particular topic. and each chapter is broken out into a short read. So technically, you can read my book in an evening. You could read it on the train on the way home if you live in, Birmingham. If you're a slow reader, maybe in Manchester, need to be on the train a bit longer. But 14 chapters with sort of 8 to 10 minute reads in the short read. But if you're curious and interested and want more, then the long read is obviously there as well. In addition, I added a bunch of lists because this is a handbook. It's a title that I didn't get, the title that the publishers gave me. And at first I was like, whoa, big shoes, handbook. That's like, I'm involved in Girl Guiding. We used to have a handbook. That was a big deal. So I thought, am I big enough as a practitioner, as a professional to write that? But it's grown on me a lot because actually what they recognized in my pitch to them was, Michelle wants to write something which sits on your desk and you pick up and put down. So when you're going into your stakeholder conversation for the first time, you're like, need a bit of cheer squad. Just have a look at one of the lists, the list of things like, what mindset do you need in order to have this conversation well? So you can just have that tiny little read and go, okay, and I really want to be your cheer squad. And that's why I wrote the book in this way. I'd be devastated if anyone said they felt like they had to start at the beginning and read all the way through, because who's got time for that? Who has got time for that? So I really broke it out and structured it in 3 parts. The first part is the sort of more practical stuff, like why do we need to do what we do? As I say, we eventually get to solutions. The middle part is some frameworks, deliberately, Celine, frameworks, not models, because I'm not here telling you what to do. I'm here saying, here's some stuff you might want to try. In your context, it might work. This way, in your context, it might work in a different way, and in his context, it might work in a different way. So that's the middle section. And then the final section really is about different strategies, one of which is that we need to be kind to ourselves. So the final chapter is called Hold It Lightly and Celebrate Success. Because I think that in L&D, what we tend to do is we go in, solutions, and then we go in again, more solutions with a new project. But actually pause, celebrate what you've done, reflect on what you've done, and then take that success to the next project. So that's how it's broken down, hopefully really accessibly.
And Michelle, the middle part of the book, you discuss these frameworks, not models. Would you be able to talk us through that a little bit? And we have the whiteboard here, if you can kind of bring it to life for us.
Can't have L&Ders in a room, can you, without, I did ask for a flip chart, but we've gone sustainable with a whiteboard. Yeah. So there are 3 different frameworks. One is the ICE framework, information, communication, and education, where briefly my view is that information is what we're sharing when we're involved in L&D. We don't own that. That belongs to various different stakeholders in your organization. So sometimes all we need to do with that information is communicate it well. That actually might not be your job. That might be internal comms that you need to work alongside. Sometimes we need to educate, and that's where we really need to get involved. And often where it goes wrong is where we think we own the information, or where we think we're trying to educate when it's just tell them. They just need a checklist, or they just need a briefing document, and we try and make it really complicated with a course. So that's one of the frameworks, very briefly. Another of the frameworks is, and I've talked about this a lot, so if you go onto the book site, which is the LandDhandbook.com, you can see the links to the different podcasts and interviews that I've been doing, which Celine mentioned. And environment, permission, and culture is the one that I've probably talked about the most, where my view there is that we don't often think enough about the environment that our learners are in. We don't think about the hardware that they have in order to learn. We might be creating fantastic digital resources, really fantastic videos or animations. Are we expecting them to look at them on their own phone, at their own cost, in their own time? Is there a moral question around that? So I invite people to just play around with what environment are we expecting learners to be in, and therefore what permissions do we need to give them? Great, have a look at it on your own phone, but I'm going to sub you a $5 every month towards your your network costs, because it's cheaper us to do that than it is to buy you a company mobile phone. So we need to think about that permission piece. And if you're watching these videos and the CEO wanders by and goes, "Hey, great job, what are you watching? What are you learning? Talk to me about it," or is the CEO going, "Hell are you watching TV at work for?" Yeah. You need to be implied around how and when people are going to learn. This, of course, feeds into a learning culture. And that whole piece around learning culture is something that I'm really curious about. But today, I want to talk to you. Get a pen in my hand. Now I'm in my comfort zone. I want to talk to you about the 3 R's, which is one of my frameworks, not models, which I've tried and tested with a lot of my clients. And I work with corporates. I also work with a lot of third sector as well. And this model briefly, you didn't pick me up on it, Celine.
Framework.
Deliberately.
Framework.
This framework briefly goes like this. So it's very typical in an organization that we put our learning into boxes. These boxes, think of your context as I'm talking about this. So these boxes could be, for example, 3 different courses. They could be day 1, day 2, day 3 of an induction program. It's your formal route, okay? So here we have our person who comes in. Let's give them a hat, because that's all I can draw. I can't draw very well. And they head into our formal route of learning. Now, if you're really enlightened, this formal starts as soon as they've got their job offer signed and sealed and delivered before they've walked in the door. Brilliant, well done. Of course, it carries on this way. And, if they're junior, they might only get 1 box. If they're senior, of course, they get a leadership program like all the leaders, even though it's not necessarily the leaders that need it. It's the junior people that are aspiring. But anyway, so this is the formal route. Do we recognize this? Yeah? You've got your context in your mind. Is that how it actually happens in reality? Never. Think about how you learned just to come to this conference. You may have had an email, you may have seen a flyer, you may have seen something on Instagram. They're your formal things that learning technology is pushing out to you. But the reality is we have a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on in our world. Let me change my pen. So we may have listened to a song that inspired us to do something. We may have watched a TV show that inspired us to do something. We may have, of course, read a book. This is me and my terrible sketchnoting, but you get the impression. We may, of course, read a newspaper. This is a rolled-up newspaper. We may, of course, spoken to somebody else when we've got another conversation going on. Tell me what other things we may have done. What goes on around in the real world? Past experiences, okay, we're representing that with
How are you going to draw that?
History. It's now a sketch note. What else have we got? Barriers. Okay, I'm going to bit a big brick wall. Here we go, here's a brick wall, very quickly drawn. Yeah, so you've hit some barriers, so you've got some experiences and thinking about that. What else? All these resources that are around us. You listen to my podcast. Mm-hmm. There you go. So yeah, we might have a little Walkman. Who remembers those?
A Walkman.
This is my little, showing my age, my little Sony Walkman. They're wireless now. I'll just take the wire off. There you go. What else have we got? What are the resources? What do you do in your world? Okay, so you might have another. So this is different to my TV. I'll put an antennae on the TV. This is your internet, or your intranet. So you've got all of these resources. The point is, we are surrounded by resources. And our little employee here, she doesn't just go, of course. She might start here because you're enlightened and you've sent her this access prior to her joining your company. But even then, she'll have seen that program on TV, and then she'll have read that article in the industry magazine. And then, of course, she skipped back as she was going to her new job, and she thought, that song's really inspiring me. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do in my new job. And then, of course, what she does is she goes to the company intranet on the first day, and then she has a chat with somebody about it. Is this making sense? This is where we're at. Okay, we've got the history of the company she needs to get hold of while she's listening to her podcast, and then eventually she might spit out at the other end, knowing what she's doing for her job. And then, of course, she takes on a new project, or gets a new colleague, or gets a promotion, and she loops all the way back round again. If you in L&D are only going here, which is required in the R's, you're forgetting all the resources in the R's, and that's the reality. So why do we care? Well, we care because these resources are actually what people do in order to learn. And the biggest resource is asking the person sitting next to them. The biggest risk is also asking the person sitting next to them. So Jenny, who's been there for 45 years and has always done it that way, will teach our new employee how to do it her way, which might be the right way. It also might not be the right way as well. And then the company's got no influence in that. So I'm not suggesting we don't ask our new employee to speak to Jenny. That would be great, chat to her. But actually, if she's got a specific problem, who else does she know? And when you're onboarding somebody who is currently working remotely, she doesn't even know Jenny. She doesn't have a Jenny. So who does she ask at that point? So we in L&D can start to consolidate resource for her to ask. I guess what we're talking about here is knowledge management. The risk we have, of course, especially when we're working in a hybrid or remote way, is that she's lonely. So my final recommendation is to wrap all of this in community. And if we wrap it all in community, what we're doing there is we're connecting people. We're enabling people to talk to each other. So our new employee or our existing employee or even Jenny, who's been here forever, will know who to go to for the different problems. She's got the option to talk to people. We're actually maybe have to facilitate that with maybe a lunch and learn or a session like this, where you've got somebody who with something to say and others who want to come along. So that's my 3 R's. And of course, that final R is the referring in of information from the wider community. Most organizations don't hire people who are rubbish. The recruitment team would be really bad at their jobs. They hire people who know what they're talking about, but how often do you harness that and share it within? Often we'll say, we've not had any training because we haven't been in the boxes, or we haven't had any training because we haven't invited an external person to come and talk to us. But actually, my recommendation is that we do more around what can we bring in from within and share that. And so the model, framework. The framework will be different in every single context. You may find your community is very small. You may have multiple communities. You may find that your resources are very multiple and you dial down your formal. Okay, every single one of you will have a different take on what this model looks like for you. So this is generic employee. You can redraw this for yourselves if it makes sense. Any thoughts? Any questions about it?
I was just thinking that this simplicity of some of the items that you're mentioning there, that in learning and development, we tend to overcomplicate things. And, even there's a program we've been running called Skills for Growth, where one of the things we asked everyone to do was just to think of a song or a piece of music that represents the learning or the change that you're trying to make. And it had huge impact and the songs and the pieces of music that people will think of and then carry through with them is really motivating. And as you say, just even walking into work, just putting that on your Walkman and listening. And also with this program in our I'm calling them exit interviews from the program, community is one of the main 4 ingredients that has really impacted on people being able to learn and create change. And again, I don't think we use that enough, because a community can be literally a small group of people.
It can just be a community of practice, people who have worked on the project, for example, to just regularly meet. What's changed, what's not changed, what can we learn? I try always to build a community into all of the programs I work with my clients. We recently did some work with Co-op, and I always try and leave a legacy within an organization. So it's a really bad business model. If you want to go freelance, don't do what I do. Because what happens is you're empowering the people that you're working with to do it for themselves. It satisfies my values, but it doesn't satisfy my mortgage payments. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So you're constantly looking for new clients, but it's a great way that they can have this legacy. So with Co-op, they wanted to move to facilitating in an online way, but in an engaging online way. And so everybody that I brought in my company to work alongside had a responsibility to train up a Co-op partner so that they could then run. And so we had one run by the expert, one together that they paired up, and then one run by the Co-op employee, so that they could see the progression and they could practice and learn. The Co-op employees then formed a little community of practice so that they had, I tried it, it didn't work as well. Why? What went wrong? And you can discuss it, and it's a safe, psychological safe space. And I think that that's part of the problem. if you marry this framework up with the environment, permission, and culture that I mentioned earlier, and the permission isn't there for a community to work well, for people to ask the questions, to have that safe space, actually what you're doing is you're setting up something with the tumbleweed rolling by, because nobody really knows how to act in that community. Nobody knows what to say. Nobody knows, are they allowed to refer in resources of themselves, you know? So I do think you need to sort of match the things together within the context that you have. Was there a question there? No? Sorry, thought I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just thinking the sign of a great leader is somebody who does what they do and then they can walk away and everybody can still make it work and function. So, Michelle, great leader. Let's put it out to everyone. So obviously some of you may have read some or part of, or all of the book. Some of you have not read it yet and hopefully you're inspired to do so now. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments for Michelle?
Frameworks instead of models. Is there a particular model? I know you went for frameworks, but still a particular model which you... Everybody can hear me? Okay. So, just questioning, you've gone for frameworks instead of models. Is there a particular model which you prefer, or you found that, okay, if I would have gone for a model, this would have been much more closer to the ideal framework?
So from an L&D, so the question really is, what L&D model do I like using? I really don't want this to sound arrogant, but I'm going to say no, because everyone's context is different. Absolutely everyone's context, and I don't think I've ever come across a model which fits every single context. There are certain elements of lots of models that I like. So, for example, Nigel Harrison's performance consulting. I like a lot of his early questioning. I like his what's the cost of the gap? So if you're not familiar with his model, just briefly, what he talks about is how, make a statement about where we are now, make a statement about where you want things to be in the future, and then look at that void in between, because that's where the work is. I'm not necessarily that keen on how he then does the solutions. It feels tacked on the end to me. So it's why I didn't want to make a statement. These are my models. You must follow them. They're not. They're just things that you might hang your hat on. You might, for example, go, oh, well, we're going to stick with formal for now, and the resources around there are going to be left to chance, left to free will. That's fine. If that's your context, if that's what you've got budget, time, energy for, then who am I to say how you should run your L&D department? I wrote the book in order to make people think, well, I just want to try something new. What could I try? And so there's a whole series of tiny little tweets, and this is where it all stemmed from way back in the day. When I went from being in a global learning role into freelance role, I was really conscious in my global role that, I wanted to try something, but I needed a cheer squad. I needed somebody to just go, it's okay, Michelle, give it a go. I was really fortunate. I had a fantastic, fantastic boss, Catherine Marlowe, who took me to the edge of the cliff, and I was like this, looking down, and she said, look up, you might fly if you jump, and if you don't fly, it's a long way to fall, so you've got ages yet, And so having that cheer squad behind me, and having somebody who was as open-minded as her to say, just give stuff a try. So I started tweeting every day to just encourage other people to just give something a try. It might work, it might not work. And so it's really important to me that the book doesn't come across as preachy or one way, because there isn't one. There just isn't one way. I could run the same project, the Curiosity project I ran with Virtual College. If I go to a different provider who like them, wanted to move from product selling to consultative selling in learning and development, they've got a whole set of history, a whole set of context, which is different. So the project will run differently. So sorry, but no.
I'm with you on that process, as well as I agree with your approach about teaching them how to catch a fish instead of giving them a fish. I like that approach. I'm doing that in my company as well. But yeah, it is making a huge difference. Absolutely. Love your book.
Oh, thank you.
I also love how, you started it as tweets, and it was loads and loads and loads of tweets that you then kind of pulled together. And is that something that if anybody is thinking about writing a book, or at any point, is that something that you would recommend to them? Or did that overcomplicate things, or did that make things easier for you?
It was unusual in a conversation with the publisher, who were like, is that not out of date? Yeah, probably. But what I've done is bring them bang up to date. And And I think there's still relevance because it's contextual. What was contextually relevant when I wrote that tweet? And they were just off the cuff, what was happening in the industry, you know, if I'd been to a conference, what occurred to me, that kind of thing. There was no grand plan. There was no kind of, you know, started out on January 1st with a big list. It was just, I wanted to respond to what I was seeing and feeling and make it organic. I kind of live my life in that way. I'm too busy. I've got 3 kids, 4 dogs, elderly parents. I ain't got time for planning like that at that nth level degree. But so it didn't make it complicated in it really, because I feel very passionate. The whole book is just a big tweet. It's just a try this. Does it work? Chat to your personal learning network about it. You know, chat to other people about it. And if it just encourages the start of a conversation. One of the things that the tweets really started with, give a big shout out to Kevin May. He was at Good Things Foundation, and Kevin started to gather them up weekly and then just talk about those topics in his team meetings. And he said it just sparked different conversations, and like that was all I ever did it for.
Which again is another example of what you have up there. There's so many different resources we can pull on, and sometimes we're not thinking about them at all.
Exactly.
So anyone else got any questions or comments or thoughts for Michelle?
I'm just interested in the notion of purpose and everything. That's been quite a key topic of today, and growth mindset and understanding whys and these kind of things. And that seems to be, it's a bit, if we go all the way back to like Simon Sinek and start with why, it's quite a consistent theme for a number of years, and yet we're still talking about it as kind of at the forefront of things. Why is that? Why are we not all understanding our why and talking about something else, or understanding our purpose?
I think personally there's several reasons, but the biggest one is that do we have a big enough voice within our organisations? We are often on the receiving end of Bob needs a sales course. Okay, which course would Bob like? What are Bob's dates? What is your budget? And so we start with the wrong questions because we've always done that, and that's the box that we're seeing within our organisation. And it is very hard. Not everyone has a Catherine Marlowe behind them going, yeah, you ask that question. You go and have that meeting with the CEO and ask that question. And so I know I've been fortunate in my career. I think the other reason, the whole seat at the table question, but is one. But the other reason is because it's sometimes easier to just give Bob a sales course. And some people, lots of people, go to work to earn money because their life exists outside of work. And that's absolutely fine. So if we're in those types of environments and we're starting to ask why, my genuine advice to anyone is find an environment that wants you to ask why, because that could be a really hard change. Or go for it. Get yourself a cheer squad behind you and just keep asking.
Question down at the back. Yeah. I always think curiosity and asking questions is such an interesting topic, because we, as adults, that curiosity killed the cat. Like, we really believe that. It's also how the brain develops and into adulthood. It's actually, there's almost the way that actually everything has come together in the brain. We almost forget to be those curious children.
We've got a good excuse now, though, because of course COVID's changed everything. Absolutely changed everything. And so we can start to ask the awkward questions because people have got a bit more of an open mind. I'm a church warden in my village, and if 3 years ago we would have said to, of course, Church of England, a lot of older people, we'd like to go and worship outside, I know 100% of people would have went, what?
The rain.
Why would we do that? And this year we have no reason to do that, but we have done that for the last 2 years, and everyone's going, oh, wasn't it nice with the birds? Wasn't it nice with the blue skies? Can we go outside? Yeah. And it's just a crazy time. So we do have a bit of an excuse to kind of get that punch in and say, we can do stuff differently. I talk about in the book, make better cake. And what I mean by make better cake is just try something small over here. And in the office when you bring cake in, suddenly somebody appears from goodness knows where. And they're like, I heard there was cake. If you make something great, people will hear about it. It goes out on that little grapevine, the little conversations up here, a little bit of the history of the organization, that type of stuff. And if you make better cake, people will start coming to you. And I to be honest, that's how I started. Just start really small, get some really good advocates, and then build from there.
And let's come back to that and put a challenge to the audience around that. Just the question, sir, down here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, looking at your diagram, if community is already embedded into project groups, do you think that then replaces communities of practice?
I didn't quite catch the
If
question.
what is, we missed the second or third word.
If the community is already embedded into the project groups, do you think that then replaces the communities of practice?
Okay, so if you've already got an existing community, but perhaps got the other parts, then they're not joined up. Yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying. And we do now, we're better at communities. And, thanks to Microsoft and Teams, we've now all got so many communities, it's almost overwhelming, isn't it? It's all, for me, about purpose. Bringing people together, putting them in a room. If I was to not be here, if you would just happen to be in this room together, and if Celine wasn't here and we weren't having this conversation, you all wouldn't just spontaneously be talking about the same thing. And so giving purpose to a community is really important, whether that is a community of, community of practice. By that, the Etienne Wenger, we're coming together approach to discuss our professional work, or that's, as Andy Lancaster talks about, the Vegan Cookery Club, who've got a shared interest that come together and then happen to spin off talking about work. It's absolutely about purpose. So my question to you would be, is the community you have in existence now, for what purpose? And then if you can backfill into that with a learning purpose, great. If not, then make better cake somewhere else.
So with regard to making better cake, or making some sort of cake, because we're coming to an end of this session, I think, Michelle, it's really important for you to just ask everybody, what is one little thing that maybe just has come from this conversation that you might think about a little bit more, a takeaway, an action that you maybe have been thinking about for ages that you're just going to go and give it a go now, make a little bit of cake. Anyone like to offer anything up?
What I was keen was that you gave up your lunchtime to come and spend time with me. Thank you, you crazy people. I don't know why we're talking about cake and you're all starving, hungry. I'm honoured, thank you, I appreciate it. But I always think whenever you hear a case study at a conference or in this type of, meet the author thing, you've got to take something away. I want you to take something away. I've offered to you the opportunity to think about how you, ask for help. Ask for help when you need it, the opportunity to be, aware of my model. It's a framework. You're supposed to keep
Frameworks.
And see Celine doing her wonderful acting. So yeah, do take an action from today. And even if it's not from this session, take an action from the whole conference, because passively sitting there, taking it, washing it all in, Ebbinghaus taught us this a long time ago. We're going to forget. And so if you feel moved to do something new, to try something new today, do feel free to tweet out what action you're going to take. If you use the hashtag, the L&D Handbook, we can gather those together in our little community. There is quite a community on the socials. It doesn't have to be Twitter. You may prefer LinkedIn. You may prefer Instagram, or you may be really down with the teens, TikTok it. That's fine too. Just don't ask me to dance and my kids will literally throw me out of the house. But yeah, if you could use hashtag the L&D Handbook just to see what your little takeaway was from today, that would just be a little thought experiment on trying something new. But other than that,
And just to remind everybody, it's the lndhandbook.com, where you can listen to lots of podcasts and find out more about the book and about Michelle. So if anyone would like to share, go for it. What's your little cake you're going to go make? However, yes?
I'm actually one of the people who's read the book, and I just started at the beginning and went to the end.
well done you. Who was that?
Maybe I need to put it on the top and dip. I found there were a lot of things that resonated, a lot of things that we don't do. And I have already started trying a few things. So we've got particularly where we already did lunch and learns on our learning lunches, and one has so much conversation when we tried to set that up as a community. It's kind of died a bit, but
You do need to feed a community, yeah. You do need to feed a community.
Picked up your idea of tweets, so I do it, I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
We pick up things and we're trying that. But
But yeah, there are certain things that we're trying, or I'm trying. But yeah, I found there was definitely things that resonated, definitely things try it. It is well worth reading if you haven't done. But as Michelle said, you don't have to read it from the start. That's just, and I wrote over it as well.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
So let's celebrate her bravery and courage. We're cheerleading you.
I love a book that's got loads of, bits of paper hanging out the side, or, yeah, great. That's exactly what a handbook should be all about.
All right. Well,
Thank
you
you.
so
That's
much
really
for sharing.
kind. Spontaneous.
Yeah, fabulous. So I'm conscious that we need to let everyone go and get some lunch. Lots of cake if you can find it. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been wonderful having a conversation with you. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And of course, grab Michelle at any point.
Yeah, I will be
to share
outside now on the
at
Kogan page stand, so if anyone wants to just come and chat or ask a question privately, very, very happy to chat to you anytime. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.